Not guest, not father of the groom, not Vernon Caldwell, the man who worked double shifts for 23 years so his boy could eat something better than ramen noodles every night of the week. Low, educated, fake, dad. And the bride's family. Every last one of them with their designer suits and their postgraduate degrees and their country club memberships. They laughed. Not a polite laugh. Not the kind of uncomfortable chuckle people do when they're embarrassed on your behalf. A full, open-mouthed, champagne glass in hand, look at this man kind of laugh. I sat there in that banquet hall in Savannah, Georgia, and I did not move. I did not say a word. I had spent 57 years learning that silence is not weakness. It is patience. And patience, in my experience, has a way of collecting interest. What happened the next morning at their company's office is something I still think about every single day. Not with anger. With something closer to quiet satisfaction. But before I get to that, I need you to understand who I am. Because if you don't know where I started, you won't understand why what happened at that wedding cut as deep as it did, or why my son's response to that nameplate changed everything that followed. Before we go any further, if this kind of story speaks to you, if you believe that dignity is not something that gets handed to you by a piece of paper on a wall or a title behind your name, then hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment and tell me what you think. And if you know someone who's ever been underestimated, share this video with them, because this one is for every person who was told they weren't enough and proved the whole room wrong. My name is Vernon Caldwell. I'm 57 years old. I was born and raised in Macon, Georgia, the third of 5 kids in a house that had more love than furniture. My father worked the rail yards. My mother cleaned houses on the north side of town. Neither one of them finished high school, and neither one of them ever stopped working. Not once, not for a single day that I can remember. I didn't go to college. I want to be honest about that right from the start, because the people at that wedding table sure made it the centerpiece of everything. I graduated from Macon Central High School in 1986 and went straight to work on construction sites. Started as a laborer, mixing concrete, hauling materials, doing whatever the foreman told me to do without complaint and without a clock in my eye. I was good at the work, more than good. I understood how buildings go together. I understood materials, stress loads, drainage, the way a foundation needs to breathe. I didn't learn it from a textbook. I learned it from doing it every single day for 15 years. By 2001, I had enough saved to take out a small business loan and start Caldwell Construction out of a rented office on Poplar Street in Warner Robins, Georgia. 1 truck, 2 employees. A laminated business card I printed myself at Office Depot. My business partner, Dwight Mercer, came on 2 years later. Dwight had a business degree from Georgia Southern and handled the financial side with a precision I genuinely admired. We balanced each other. He understood numbers. I understood the work. Between the two of us, we built something real. Government contracts, residential developments, commercial projects across central Georgia. By the time Isaac was finishing high school, Caldwell Construction was doing just over $4 million a year in revenue. But none of that is what I'm most proud of. What I'm most proud of is Isaac. Isaac's mother, Pamela, left when he was 4 years old. I won't say much about that because whatever pain existed between the two of us, it is not Isaac's story to carry. What I will say is this. She left on a Thursday morning, and by Friday morning I had called my mother, arranged drop-off and pick-up at her house, and showed up to the job site on time. Because that boy needed to eat, and the only way he was going to eat was if I worked. I raised Isaac alone for 23 years. That means I was the one at the parent-teacher conferences. I was the one who sat at the kitchen table helping with algebra homework. I only barely understood myself. I was the one who drove him to baseball practice at 6 in the morning, because that was the only time the fields were available. I was the one who held him on the bathroom floor the night he got sick from bad cafeteria food before his 8th grade science fair and talked him into going anyway. He won 2nd place that year. I didn't do any of that to earn a reward. I did it because he was my son, and a father shows up. That's the whole job description. You show up. Isaac grew up into a remarkable man. He got his engineering degree from Georgia Tech. Smart, focused, decent in the way that decent people actually are, quietly without announcing it. He came home every Thanksgiving. He called every Sunday without me having to ask. When Caldwell Construction hit a difficult stretch in 2018, Isaac sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "Dad, tell me what you need." He was 25 years old, and he meant it. He met Camille Worthington at a corporate networking event in Atlanta 2 years ago. She was working in finance for her father's company. Beautiful girl, I'll give her that. Sharp, polished, and ambitious in the way people are when they've grown up, being told that ambition is an obligation rather than a choice. I liked her energy the first time Isaac brought her to the house. She shook my hand firmly, looked me in the eye, and said she'd heard a lot about me. I didn't realize until much later that she had been briefed rather than informed. The Worthington family was from Alpharetta, Georgia, the kind of Alpharetta that exists behind iron gates and manicured hedgerows. Camille's father, Reginald Worthington, had built a commercial real estate and investment firm called Worthington Capital Group, and he had made sure that everyone within a 10-mile radius understood exactly how much he had built and exactly how much it was worth. He carried his success the way some men carry a weapon, not concealed, always pointed in the direction of whoever needed reminding of where the power sat. Constance Worthington, Camille's mother, was the kind of woman who could deliver a devastating comment with a smile so warm you'd be 3 sentences into your response before you realized you'd been cut. She asked me at our first family dinner what kind of work I was in, and when I told her construction, she nodded in that particular way that meant she had already filed me in a drawer and closed it. "Oh, how practical," she said. That was the word she used. Practical. Isaac noticed, but he didn't say anything. I noticed, and I didn't say anything. We were both trying. That's the thing people don't tell you about the early months of a serious relationship. Everyone is trying not to be who they actually are, because they think that's what kindness looks like. It isn't. It's a delay. The engagement happened in November. Isaac proposed at the Botanical Garden in Atlanta, and I cried alone in my truck on the drive back from hearing the news. Not from sadness, from relief. My boy had found someone to love, and she had said yes, and for a moment it felt like all those years of doing this alone had added up to exactly the right thing. The wedding planning began almost immediately, and that's when things started to shift. The wedding was held on a Saturday in May at the Belfair Plantation in Bluffton, South Carolina. Grand oak trees draped in Spanish moss. A clubhouse that looked like it had been built in the 1800s and preserved to remind you that some things don't change. White linen everywhere. A string quartet in the courtyard. It was beautiful. Whatever happened inside those walls, the place itself was beautiful, and my son was getting married in it. I wore my best suit, the charcoal gray one I'd had tailored when Caldwell Construction won a county infrastructure contract, and I drove down from Warner Robins with my chest full of something I can only describe as the particular kind of pride that only fathers know. Dwight rode with me. He brought his wife, Margaret, who had known Isaac since he was 9 years old, and cried twice before we even got out of the car. We arrived at the reception hall before the ceremony ended to confirm our seats for the dinner. A young woman at the registration table handed us our table cards and name placards, the kind that sit folded in front of your seat so other guests know who you are. I looked at mine. Vernon Caldwell. Low-educated fake dad. I read it twice, the way you read something when your brain refuses, on the first pass, to accept what your eyes are reporting. Dwight saw it over my shoulder. Margaret put her hand over her mouth. I set the placard back down. I straightened it between the silverware, exactly as it had been when I picked it up. "Vernon," Dwight said quietly. "I'm fine," I said. I sat down. Here is what I want to tell you about that moment, because I think it matters. I was not fine. Let me be honest about that. There is a specific kind of pain that lives inside humiliation. Not the loud, burning kind of pain, but a cold and quiet one that settles somewhere behind your sternum and doesn't move. I sat at that table, and I felt it. I felt every year of working job sites in the Georgia heat, while other people's sons were in air-conditioned classrooms, getting the credentials that would one day be used to measure them against me. I felt every school conference I had attended alone, every bill I had figured out how to pay. Every night I had lain awake staring at the ceiling of a house I was paying for by myself, not because I was proud of struggling, but because the only alternative was to stop. I felt all of that, and I did not stand up. I did not walk over to Reginald Worthington's table and say what I was thinking. I sat there, and I breathed, and I waited. The Worthington family entered the reception hall about 40 minutes later. Reginald first, in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my first truck. Constance on his arm, in a gold dress that swept the floor and made her look like she had never once in her life been required to clean up after herself. Extended family trailing behind. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all of them holding champagne glasses with the casual ease of people for whom champagne is ambient, just part of the air in rooms like this. Reginald saw the placard on my table before he sat down. He didn't look away fast enough. He looked at it, and then he looked at me, and there was a pause, just a fraction of a second, where I thought I saw something real cross his face. Uncertainty, maybe, or recognition of having gone too far. Then Constance leaned over and read the placard, and she laughed. It was a short laugh, private between the two of them. But the table around her picked it up the way fire picks up dry grass, and within seconds 3 or 4 of the extended family members were looking at the placard, then looking at me, and laughing in that particular way that well-dressed people laugh when they believe they are above being seen. Dwight's hand tightened on the table. Margaret looked at me with eyes that asked a question I wasn't ready to answer. I kept my face still. I had learned that from my father. Keep your face still. Let them think they have the upper hand, because people who believe they have the upper hand get comfortable, and comfortable people stop paying attention. Isaac came in 10 minutes later with Camille on his arm. My son, in his wedding suit, looking like everything I had ever hoped he would become. He was scanning the room the way he always does when he enters a space, taking stock, making sure everyone he cares about is accounted for. He found me, and then he found the placard. I saw it happen in real time. I saw the moment his eyes registered the words on that folded card. I saw the color change in his face. Not a blush, not the flush of embarrassment, but something that went white and then settled into a stillness I recognized because it was the same stillness I had been wearing for the past 40 minutes. He walked toward me without breaking stride. Camille's arm was still in his, but she must have felt the shift in his gait, because she looked up at him, then followed his eyes to the placard. Isaac reached the table. He picked up the nameplate. He read it once more, as if confirming for himself what he had already seen. Then he set it back down, turned it face down so the words were against the tablecloth, and looked at Reginald across the room. Reginald was still smiling. Isaac looked at me, and he said, not loudly, not for the room, just to me, in the voice he's had since he was about 14 years old, the one that sounds like a man even when he's barely figured out how to be one. He said, "Dad, let's go home." 3 words. He wasn't leaving the wedding. He meant something else. He meant, I see what they did. I know what you are. I'm with you, not them. I looked at my son. I looked at the man standing in front of me in his wedding suit, the man I had made scrambled eggs for on Saturday, mornings and driven to baseball and helped move into his first apartment and watched graduate from Georgia Tech with a kind of pride so large it had nowhere to go except out through my eyes. And I said the only thing I could say. You've got a wife to get back to, son. Go. He didn't move for a moment. Then he nodded, picked the placard back up, carried it to the nearest trash can about 20 feet from the table, dropped it in, and walked back to Camille. The Worthington family had gone very quiet. I stayed for the dinner. I want to be clear about that. I ate my meal. I watched my son dance with his wife. I gave a toast, brief, direct, from a note card I had written 2 weeks before, and I meant every word of it. I did not make the evening about me. I did not make a scene. And when it was over, I drove back to Warner Robins with Dwight and Margaret in the car, and I did not say one word about the placard for the entire 2.5-hour drive. Margaret eventually fell asleep in the back seat. Dwight and I drove in silence for a long time, watching the Georgia night go past the windows. Finally, somewhere past Waycross, Dwight said, "You know I'm going to handle this." "You're not going to do anything," I told him. "Vernon, not tonight, not because of me." Dwight was quiet for another few miles. Then what? I thought about it. I thought about my father, who spent 40 years working the rail yards without a single person with a framed degree on their wall ever once asking him what he thought about anything. I thought about my mother, on her knees cleaning other people's floors while her children ate breakfast before school. I thought about every job site I had ever walked onto, every contractor who had underestimated the man with the dirty boots and the quiet voice. And I thought about how many of those same contractors had eventually called me to fix what they'd gotten wrong. "I'm going to let Monday handle it," I said. On Sunday, Isaac called me. He didn't apologize for the placard. He couldn't, because he hadn't put it there, and he knew I knew that. What he did instead was tell me the truth about how it had happened. He had found out late Saturday night from one of Camille's cousins who felt guilty about it, that Reginald had arranged the placards personally. He had told the event coordinator to print a custom nameplate specifically for me, specifically with those words. Constance had apparently suggested the phrase. The event coordinator had assumed incorrectly that it was an inside joke. Isaac had confronted Reginald that evening, after the reception, in the parking area outside the venue. He said it was humor, Isaac told me. He said it was meant to be playful, a ribbing. I said. I told him it wasn't. What did he say? He said that maybe I was being too sensitive, that sometimes people from different backgrounds misread social cues. There was a pause. I told him I wasn't from a different background. I was from my father's background, and my father didn't misread anything. I sat with that for a moment. Isaac, I said, I want you to go be with your wife. Whatever happens next is not your responsibility. Dad, go, I said. I love you. Monday morning, I arrived at the Caldwell construction office at 7:15. Dwight was already there. That was not unusual. Dwight is habitually early, which I've always considered to be his single most underrated quality as a business partner. What was unusual was what he had on his desk. He slid a folder across the table when I walked in and sat down, without preamble, without any introduction. I opened it. Inside was a proposal. Worthington Capital Group had been quietly pursuing a development project in the Warner-Robins area, a mixed-use commercial corridor on the south side of town, something the county had been wanting for years. The project was significant, $40 million in development, the kind of thing that gets your name on a plaque outside a building somewhere. And Worthington Capital Group needed a general contractor, a local one, with the relationships, the workforce, the county experience to make the project happen on time. Caldwell Construction had been informally approached about this project 8 months ago. I remembered the inquiry. I had responded with our standard materials, company profile, project history, references, and heard nothing back. I had assumed we weren't what they were looking for, and moved on. What I had not known was that we were exactly what they were looking for. What Dwight had discovered over the weekend, through a contact at the county planning office who owed him a favor, was that Worthington Capital Group's first choice for general contractor had withdrawn from the project 2 weeks earlier due to a conflict with another client. And their second choice, a firm out of Macon, had come back with a revised bid 40% over budget. They needed someone, and they needed someone quickly, because the county had given them a hard deadline on breaking ground, or the development rights would revert. Dwight looked at me across the desk. They called our office Friday, he said, while we were driving down to Bluffton, left a message with the answering service, Reginald Worthington himself. I looked at the folder. I thought about that dining room in Bluffton, South Carolina. I thought about the nameplate and the laugh, and the way Constance had looked at me like I was a service worker who had wandered into the wrong party. What are you thinking? Dwight asked. I'm thinking, I said, that we've been doing this business for 22 years, and I've never once taken a meeting I wasn't prepared for. Are you going to take the meeting? I closed the folder. Reginald Worthington arrived at our office on that Monday at 11 o'clock. He brought 2 people with him, a finance associate and a project coordinator, both of them young, both of them in the kind of suits that announce themselves before you do. He walked through the door of the Caldwell construction offices, which are modest because I have never spent money on appearances that belonged in the work, and he looked around, and I could see him adjusting his expectations in real time. I let Dwight greet them. I stayed in my office for another 4 minutes. I have a rule about that. You never walk out to meet someone the moment they arrive. It communicates that you've been waiting. I hadn't been waiting. I'd been working. When I came out, Reginald extended his hand. I shook it. His associate set up a brief presentation on a laptop. The project scope, the timeline, the community impact, the county partnership. It was a solid pitch. I'll give them that. They knew how to present. When it was finished, Reginald leaned back and said, Vernon, we think Caldwell Construction is the right fit for this. You know this county. You've got the workforce relationships. And frankly, after the delays we've had with other firms, we need someone who can move. I looked at him for a moment. Then I said, "Reginald, I want to ask you something directly." He nodded. "Of course." "On Saturday evening at your daughter's wedding reception, there was a nameplate at my table." The room went completely still. His finance associate looked at the table. His project coordinator looked at the wall. Dwight looked at me with an expression that was somewhere between admiration and concern. Reginald's jaw shifted slightly. "Vernon, I'm not asking you to apologize," I said. "I'm telling you that I read it, and I understood what you meant by it. And I want us both to be sitting in the same room with the same understanding of what it meant before we have any further conversation about this project." He was quiet. "You believe," I continued, "that because I didn't attend college, I am less than you. You believe that because I built my company with my hands instead of with credentials, it is not a real company. And you believe that because my son chose to love a family you consider beneath him, he made a mistake." I paused. "I want you to know that I understand that about you. I am not angry about it. Anger is for people who are surprised, and I was not surprised. I have been in rooms with people like you my entire life." Reginald looked like a man who has stepped onto ice and isn't sure yet how thick it is. "But here is what you should know," I said. "Caldwell Construction holds active contracts with 5 county governments in central Georgia. We have a 22-year safety record with no lost-time incidents. We have completed 43 commercial projects above $1 million in value, and we have never once missed a county deadline. The man who built this company did not need a degree to understand materials, workforce management, permitting, or the specific way a county commissioner expects to be communicated with." I folded my hands on the table. "You need this project to move in 60 days, or you lose the development rights. I looked up the county filing on Friday. That is correct, isn't it?" Reginald nodded slowly. "Then you need me more than I need you," I said, "and I think we both know it." Silence. Then Reginald Worthington did something I did not fully expect. He exhaled. A long, controlled breath, the kind that men release when they've been holding something and have finally decided it isn't worth holding anymore. He looked at me, not the way he had looked at me on Saturday, not with that reflexive assessment that places you in a category before you've finished your sentence, but with something closer to genuine attention. "You're right," he said quietly, "about all of it." He didn't say more than that. Men like Reginald don't do extended apologies. They do acknowledgments, and they move. I respected it, even if it wasn't everything it should have been. We spent the next 2 hours reviewing the project's scope. Dwight walked through our capacity numbers. I walked through the site assessment I had pulled together over the weekend, because I had seen the development proposal 8 months ago and I had never fully stopped thinking about it, even after the inquiry went quiet. By the time Reginald's team left, we had a framework for a formal contract discussion. Dwight waited until their car pulled out of the lot. Then he turned to me and said, "You had the site assessment ready." "I did it Saturday night," I said, "after we got home." He shook his head. "Vernon, the building doesn't care who built it," I told him. "It either stands or it doesn't." Isaac called me that evening. He had heard from Camille, who had heard from her father, that the meeting had happened and that things had gone, in Reginald's words, unexpectedly well. "What did you do, Dad?" Isaac asked. "I had a business meeting," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "Camille feels terrible about the nameplate. She didn't know before Saturday. She's asking if she can call you." "She doesn't need to call me," I said. "She married my son. That's all I need from her." "Dad." "Isaac." I let a beat go. "You are a good man. You've always been a good man. That didn't come from a classroom. It came from sitting at a kitchen table in Warner Robins, doing homework with a father who didn't always understand the problems, but always stayed until they were done." I paused. "Don't let anyone tell you that where you come from is a limitation. You came from someone who showed up. That's an advantage, son. Not everyone has it." He didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then, "I love you, Dad." "I love you too," I said. "Now go be with your wife." The Caldwell construction contract with Worthington Capital Group was signed 6 weeks later. The Warner Robins mixed-use corridor project broke ground on the county deadline, exactly as required. It was the largest single contract in my company's history. Reginald Worthington and I have had perhaps a dozen professional interactions since then. He is not warm. He is probably never going to be warm. But he is respectful, and in business, respect is the currency that actually matters. Constance sent me a note through Camille about 3 months after the wedding, a handwritten card, which I thought was more than I expected from her. It said she hoped we could start fresh. I kept the card. I have not responded to it. I may eventually. I haven't decided. Some things don't need to be rushed. Isaac and Camille are doing well. They are figuring out, like every young couple figures out, that marriage is not an event, it's a practice. Something you show up to every single day and do the work. I think Isaac understands that better than most. He learned it watching someone do it alone for 23 years. I drove out to a job site last week. New commercial development on the east side of Warner Robins, a medical complex we're building for a regional healthcare group. I stood at the edge of the site in my boots watching my crew work, watching a foundation take shape from a bare piece of red Georgia clay, and I thought about a nameplate in Bluffton, South Carolina. I thought about what it's like to be called something in front of people who are laughing, and to sit still, and to breathe, and to wait. My father used to say, "The field doesn't care who planted it, it grows what was put in the ground." I never fully understood what he meant until I was older, until I understood that every callus, every early morning, every bill paid and problem solved and child fed is a thing you put in the ground. It doesn't disappear. It grows. You don't need a credential to be real. You don't need their approval to be worth something. You don't need anyone to acknowledge what you built for it to stand. The buildings are still there. My son is still my son. And no nameplate, no matter whose hands printed it, changes either of those things. Look, honestly, the nameplate thing didn't just make me angry. It broke my heart a little. Because Vernon didn't do anything wrong. He showed up. He raised that boy alone. He built something real with his bare hands. And the one day he was supposed to just sit down and be proud of his son, they put a label on him like he was a problem to be managed. But here's what I keep coming back to. Vernon didn't need the room to change. He just needed Monday morning to come. And it did. So if someone in your life right now is trying to hand you a label, not educated enough, not successful enough, not the right kind of person, just remember, labels are paper. What you've built is concrete. They always need a Vernon eventually. And when they do, make sure your price is right.